Welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we are going to cover Windows operating system archives, installs, shortcuts, and tools. So in this video we're going to look at archive files, software installation files, shortcut files, the calculator, the task manager, and the control panel. Alright, let's talk about archive files. So an archive file is a single file that contains one or more other files, typically in a compressed format. So we use these to collect multiple data files or even a single file to make it easier to move around and store. Now, file compression is going to reduce the size of the file without losing the essential information. And this can be done in a variety of algorithms, and we're not going to focus on one particular algorithm today. We're just going to look at different ways that we have archive files. So the most common one is a zip file. Then we have .rar. Now, zip file is most common, and it's the one we're going to use today. .7z is also starting to be fairly common, and I personally like it quite a bit. We have .tar, and it's not by default compressed. And we find these on like Linux type systems. tar.gz is going to use a gzip compression algorithm. tar.bz2 is going to use a bzip compression algorithm, and those are typically found on Linux systems. .jar is a Java archive file for like the Java programming language and applications. .deb is a Debian package archive file, again for Linux distros. RPM is Red Hat, is for a different type of Linux distro. A .iso file is typically used for disk images, so things like operating system files can be stored on an ISO. And then we have .image, which are disk images. They're generic archive file formats for any type of image file. Now, it's important to know that a disk image is not a picture. Okay? It just is a copy of the contents of a storage device. So creating and managing archive files, we have an archiver, and it's a software program that's used to create and manage archive files. And we have a few examples of this. So we have 7zip, which is a free tool. We have WinRAR, which is commercial, so you usually have to pay for things like that type of thing. Usually maybe there's like a light version. PZip, IZArch, and BandyZip. These are all different types of archiver programs. Now, typically your operating system will have a built-in archiver program. I personally like to get 7zip because it has a lot of tools on it, and it's supported by pretty much all of the major operating systems we might use, and it allows me to do a lot of different things with it. So I personally like 7zip, but any of these should do what you need them to do. So let's take a look at file compression first. So I'm going to minimize this here and minimize that out of the way. We're going to come over here and take a look at a little picture that I have. So let's talk about file compression. If we look at file compression here, I have a large file, and its contents can be read and used, and they're really easy to work with. And then we take an archiver program, and it compresses that file into a much smaller file, but its contents must be uncompressed in order to be used, or decompressed, however you want to say it, to be actually used. And so this is smaller, and that means it takes up less storage space, and it is easier to upload and download. So if I give you files in the future that have a lot of stuff in them, like if I want to give you some code that I have written or something like that, I'm going to give them to you in a zip file, because I can take several large files if I wanted to and compress them into one zip file and send that to you. Or I could just take one large file and compress it into a zip file and then send that to you. And like I said, I'm going to use zip because it's the most common one, but there are, of course, all of those other ones. So we sort of have this little life cycle here where we have large files that we compress into smaller files that we then need to decompress back to the larger file so that we can use them in the way that they were intended. If you try to use the stuff in the zip file or in the archive file whenever it is compressed, you won't be able to, because the data, okay, is not in a usable format. It is compressed so that it's easier to store and easier to send and receive and that sort of stuff over the internet. So it's always a good idea, especially if you can, to compress your files into a zip before sending them over like an email or sending them, uploading them to the internet or something like that, especially if they're larger files, because it's just faster and it's easier to work with whenever you're transferring them or storing them. So now that we know a little bit about how the whole compression process works, let's take a look at something. So I'm going to go ahead and click here and delete this. Now I have a file here called dracula.txt, and I want to move the size over so it's real easy for us to see. So you can see it's 871 kilobytes. And that's not really a lot, but just to show the working theory when it comes to compression. So I'm going to click on dracula.txt here, and I'm going to right click on it. And if I want to compress this, I'm going to say send to compressed zip folder. And I'll click on that right there, and it will make me a zip folder, and it looks like this with its own special little icon, and it says dracula.zip, and then you will see, oh, look at that, 338 kilobytes, which is less than half of the original size of dracula.txt. So while this is on a small scale, it can be really useful whenever we have lots of files. And let's say I wanted to package all these up into the same zip file. So I'm going to get rid of that one, my dracula.zip. And let's say I wanted to send all of these to someone. All right, I can click on all of them. By the way, what I'm doing to click on all of them is I was holding control. So hold control and click on all of them. You could also click and drag, and that will get all of them that way. Then I'm going to right click and come down here. Now you'll also see send to compressed zip folder. See, and it will give it a name automatically for you, and you'll see that it's 387 kilobytes, and you can name it. I'm just going to call it files.zip. And I could send this file, this single file, over the internet to you, and then when you get it, you look at it and say, okay, I'm going to click on it, I'm going to right click, and I'll come down here and you'll see extract all. So if you say extract all, it will ask you, hey, where do you want me to extract it to? And you can click or unclick the show extracted files when complete if you want it to automatically take you there. All right, I'm going to unclick that for just now, but it says browse here, and I can tell it where I want it to go. Right now, we're just going to leave it. It's going to create a folder called files where I'm already at, and I'm just going to extract it here. So you see, there's files, and those are all the files that I had stuck in that particular folder. Of course, we can see the size of, whoops, I moved it too far over. We can see the size of these files here. And the size of the zip file, which is, pretty small for everything that we have here in these files. So I'm going to take a look here and delete files. Now let's look at this zip file again. You'll also see up here at the top where you can click on this. And this is a little tool that opens up. This is the built-in archiver tool that we have with Windows, and it allows you to extract all. So you could click on this, then click on the little extract button up at the top and click extract all. You'll have the same thing. This time I'm going to click show extracted files when completed and hit extract. It made that folder, and then it took me to it and opened it up in a new window. So now I can see all of the files. Now that it's decompressed, I can actually open them. If I click inside here and try to click on that, right, it will automatically let me look at some of them. Let's see if it'll let me look at the PNG. It will. Now, this is not true for all zip files. Sometimes you won't be able to look at the files that are inside there before you extract them all. And this is because everything is zipped up. So if you actually want to use the files and stuff that are inside this zip folder, you need to make sure that you extract them into a regular little folder for you to use. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And delete that. So here are a few of the different archiver tools that you can get for free. So this one right here is my personal favorite. It is 7-zip, and you'll see several different options. For most people, you're looking for this one right here if you're running Windows. And of course, if you're running something else, you'll have to look into how they actually download it. But most people are using Windows when they look for this, and since we're talking about Windows here, that's the one that you're looking for. You click the download link, and it will download a executable for you that you can take a look into and mess with. And we will use that just a little bit later. We've also got WinRAR here. WinRAR is another one, but you have different little versions of it, and you need to be real careful. Especially lately, there have been some malware versions of WinRAR that have been circulated, and so you need to be very careful whenever you download stuff like this, especially whenever you're looking for copies of software on the internet. But WinRAR is another good one that a lot of people like. I personally prefer 7-zip, like I said. Here is pzip. Pzip is another one that you can use. And it shows you all of the different supported file types that it can use and the different ones that it can extract and mess around with. We've got IZArc. This is another one you can download. And it shows you all of the different file types that it will support. And then, of course, we have BandyZip. And this one is just for Windows. And, of course, you can download this one as well. So later, we will use that little executable. Software installation files. So there are two main types of these files that we use to install software on Windows. One is an MSI, which is not as common as the other one, which is .exe. But MSI files are Windows installer packages. They contain a database that contains all of the information needed to install the software. They include program files, registry settings, and shortcuts. We have .exe files or executables, which are often used to install software on Windows. These files are not as reliable as MSI files, but you will see a lot more of them than you will MSI files. If the installation is interrupted for any reason, the exe file may not be able to resume, and you might have to start over. There are some other file types that you may contend with on Windows, .cab or .cab files. These are cabinet files and are compressed that are used to store and distribute certain software packages. MSP and MST, you're going to see these a lot less than you see .exe or .msi. And then there's some general considerations when installing software. One of them is to only download software that you get from a trusted source. And then always read the end-user license agreement like everyone always does. And then be careful when you install that software from unknown sources because they may contain malware. And this is the number one way that people get malware, is installing suspicious files that they got off the internet thinking, oh, everything's just safe. So be very careful whenever you mess with this. So let's look at downloading and installing a few things here. So I have two little places to get some software that we will need and later in the class, and one is Python. So I'm going to click and download the executable for Python. You'll see that's Python and then .exe. So we'll need that for installing Python. And then another one is a little code editor that you may like. It's actually the one that I use here. It's called VS Code. And so we're going to download for Windows. And you'll see that up here it is downloading. And it is also an executable. So you're going to see a lot of executables. You'll also see 7-zip down here that I downloaded earlier. So I have 3 executables for us to go through what it's like to install them. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find those. Now I can click Show All Downloads and it will show me a little link here to go to the folder that I want to go to. So I click Show in Folder, and of course they're in my Downloads folder by default, and I have these 3 little executable files here. So if we want to install 7-zip, we go ahead and we double click on the executable, and it will ask you if you want to allow the app to make changes to your device. So you will need administrator privileges for some things that you try to install. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click yes. It's going to ask me where do I want to stick it. The default is usually okay, but you could change it if you wanted to. And we'll let it run its little piece here. All right, so now we have 7-zip done. Let's see what we can do with it. Let's see if I can right click. And you'll see right there, I now have 7-zip on my little context menu here. So I now have 7-zip and I can use it to open archives, create archives, do all sorts of stuff with that. Now let's look at Python. Now I already have Python installed on this particular device. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall it, and then we're going to reinstall Python. Alright, so I got both those programs uninstalled, so we're going to go through the process of installing Python here. So I'm going to double click on this, and you will see that we have a couple of different options. There is, of course, we have install now, we have custom installation, you got use admin privileges when installing python.exe. We're going to uncheck that because we want to install it as a user and not as an administrator. So we're going to uncheck that. And then we definitely want to add this add python.exe to path. You don't have to know why. I just want you to go ahead and do that. If you're interested in why, we can discuss that in a different video, or maybe you could look up what the path is and see why maybe we might want Python on there. So I'm going to click install now. And it'll do its little thing. It's running a program on my computer, and basically what it's doing is it's unzipping files and it's putting them in the right spot in the file system and all of the different little pieces and parts that go with it so that I don't have to go in and manipulate this myself. Now we'll give it just a second and we'll be right back. Alright, so it got through its little setup. It says setup was successful, and it's giving you some little things you can do, and of course there are some, anytime you see this little shield, that means you need to have administrator privileges to do that, and we're just going to ignore that for now and not mess with that at all. We'll hit close. So there's Python installed, and let's see if Python is actually here. So I'm going to type CLS to clear this out. I'm going to type Python --version. Let's see if that'll work. I don't know, it doesn't like Python on there. Let's type Python-V. Still doesn't like it. Let's go see if we can find Python. Alright, I reloaded my PowerShell here, and now if I type Python --version, we see that we are running this current version of Python. So if you have that issue, you might just need to reload your PowerShell, and that'll solve that problem. So we've got that installed. We can now do our Python stuff that we need. Minimize this. We have one more to download and install. This is our VS Code user setup. So I'm going to double click on that. Of course, it's going to run its little setup here. Now this is a EULA right here, end user license agreement, and of course you have to accept that. If you want to use it, it's going to ask you where to put it. In programs is not a bad thing. In this particular case, it's downloading it to my user, which is what I want. The good news is you don't need admin privileges most of the time when you're downloading stuff to your user account. And then we're going to create some shortcuts, and we can say don't create a start menu folder. We can change different things there if we want to. And here it asks us what we want to add, so we can add an open with code action. I do actually want this, so when I right click on something, I want to be able to open it with code. All right, and I'm going to add it to both of those. I want to make sure that this is on the path, and that should already be there. We'll also just go ahead and create a desktop icon. Why not? We got all that. We click install, and it runs its little install script. We got a little bar that shows us the progress that it's making. And you can see that it's extracting files. So there's an archive thing going on in here. Believe it or not, executables often have links and all kinds of things like that stored in them. They themselves are sort of like archive files. And so now that we're finished, we can click finish, and it will open up a code for us just like that, and it takes me to the files that I had already opened earlier. And of course for me, it has some of my old programs and stuff already there, so it takes me right to it. All right, so we will close that down. So that's how we install programs on Windows. And of course, every installer is a little bit different, but in general, they have the same principles. And remember, we're looking at .exe files and .msi files for most of them whenever we do install things. So shortcut files. So a shortcut file is a type of file that points to another file or folder. When you double click on a shortcut file, Windows will open that file or folder that the shortcut points to. And then there are two main shortcut file types. We have .lnks, or these are links. So they're used to point to files, folders, and other resources on our computer or our network. And then we have .url, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator. And these are shortcut files that point to pages. You'll also hear it pronounced .url as well. And you can usually think of those as like hyperlinks, for example. We have other shortcut files that you may see, but these are significantly less common. We got .pif or .pif. We got .shb and .shs. And so we're going to look at how to make shortcut files and how to use them. You've already been using shortcuts. If you've used Windows at all, you've already been using shortcuts. For example, here we have two beautiful shortcuts, one to Microsoft Edge. So we can right click on it and we come down to Properties, and we can see it is a target to msedge.exe, and it is a shortcut file. You see it says shortcut. If we cancel out of that, we look at Chrome, we also see that it is a shortcut. So I'm going to come down here and look at Properties, and we can see what it points to as well. It points to chrome.exe. So these are two shortcuts. So chrome.exe isn't sitting right here in the desktop. Neither is msedge.exe. And if we want to look a little more closely at this, type cls, and I will cd ... and then type dir. And I can see that if I look at this right here, there is my Chrome shortcut, and you'll see it says .lnk, and we have a Microsoft Edge shortcut, which also says .lnk. So let's create a couple more shortcuts. Ooh, there's even Visual Studio Code.lnk there. So we have a couple of link files, and these are to things on our file system. Now let's say that we want to make a couple of these. So let's say, I don't know, let me get rid of Visual Studio Code here, and let's say I want to make a shortcut to that. So if I have it somewhere, like let's come over here and say VS Code, I could right click on that, and you see there's a couple of different things that we can do, like pin to start, pin to taskbar. Let's try open file location. So let's say I don't want to, how the heck do I get here? That is a long path right there. Look at that. That's a long path I don't want to have to remember to come back here and run Visual Studio Code. And if I don't really like things on my taskbar, I want them on my desktop, I need to create a shortcut. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to come down here, and you can see send to. An easy one is send to desktop to create a shortcut, but you can also just create a shortcut right here and stick it wherever you want. So I can click create shortcut, and you'll see that I have this nice pretty little shortcut file. And you'll even see that this right here is technically even a shortcut itself, but I could move that shortcut wherever I wanted to. So let's see, let's go to Properties. Let's see exactly where this points to. I'm going to copy that and see if it'll let me put it up here. Oops. So here we are. Well, didn't quite work out. There we go. And we're going to go back up here to the front, get rid of that extra little parenthesis. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, so now here is our actual code.exe file. And if I want to create a shortcut to that, I could send it to the desktop like that. We'll do that one. We'll also right click and do create shortcut, and you'll see, oop, created a shortcut right there. And that's going to be another LNK file. So if I go to Properties, I'll look at that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And let's go, whoops, I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. and let's go look at the one on our desktop. So here we have one on our desktop. I double click on that and it runs VS Code. So pretty simple how we create a shortcut. You just right click and you can send it to the desktop if you want to send it to the desktop, or you can just make a shortcut file and move that shortcut file wherever in the system that you want. And that is for .lnks. .lnks are for link files. They're going to be stuff that's on your system, on your file system. If you want to make one from the internet, let's click on Chrome here. And I don't know, let's go to Wikipedia. That's always everybody's favorite. So let's go to Wikipedia. And let's say I want to make a shortcut for Wikipedia. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to grab this full URL there. That's what this is called, by the way. It's a Uniform Resource Locator, a URL. And I'm going to copy that with Control-C. And let's go to, let's see if I can do a new shortcut. So just so you catch what I did there, I hit right click and I went to New and Shortcut. And it's going to ask me type the location of the item. If I put a link to a website there and click Next, it's going to ask for the name. We're going to call this Wikipedia. And so now I have a shortcut, and it's going to give an icon of whatever the default browser is. If I double click on that, it's going to ask me what to use. But I want to show you, if we go back to our desktop here and we type dir again, you'll see that that shortcut I just created is .url, and that's because that's a link to a website, where .lnk is a link to something on our file system. So there's a big difference there between those two shortcuts, but they're both very, very useful shortcuts for us to make. It's time now for us to take a look at some tools that we have in Microsoft Windows. And the first one we're going to talk about is the very useful calculator tool. And we're going to look at first, how do we access the calculator? So the first way is pretty simple. You could go down here to your Windows tile and click on it. And if you scroll down from A, you can find calculator and click right there, and it will pop up the calculator for you. We can go down to the search bar and we can search for calculator. And there it is right there. We can open it up that way. We could also use my personal favorite method, which is Windows plus R, and type calc and hit enter, and it will open up the calculator for you. Now there's a couple of interesting things about this calculator. If you have never messed around with it very much, you are probably under the impression that it can't do very much and you might need a separate calculator. But that's not actually true. So here's what the standard looks like whenever you pop it up. And there are a couple really cool things that we can do with this. Of course, we have our number buttons down here. We have our arithmetic operators, I should say. We have some things for square root, square, 1 over x, of course, which is like the inverse of x. And then we have percent. And we have clear all, clear, backspace, all the little tools, stuff for decimal points. Okay, so let's look at the different options we have here. Up here we have this little button, and this is a super useful button whenever you're trying to work with the calculator. If you click on this, what this does is it keeps it on top. So no matter what I open, I can open up all kinds of stuff, and it will keep this calculator on top. Now, unfortunately, the only irritating part about this is that it only works for this basic standard calculator. Right? If I want to do anything else with it, if I change the type of calculator like to scientific, that goes away. Even if I hit Alt and up. So the key, the special key for that is if you hit Alt and up arrow, it will keep it on top. And then you can do Alt and down, and that will take you out of it as well. But it only works for the standard calculator. Now here we have history, which is Control H, and it shows that there is no history. We haven't done any math. If I do 2 plus 2 equals, we'll have that right there. And if I hit history, you'll see our history. I can bring back up the original problem that I did. If I make this window a little bit larger, history and memory will show up over here on the right. So I could click on that one, or I could click on that one, and it will keep track of the math that I've done so far. I can hit clear and clear everything. If I want to keep track of memory, I could do 2 plus 4. That gives me 6, and I add that to my memory. And that's what all these little buttons here are for. If I do MC, that's going to clear the memory. So let's do 2 plus 2, add that to memory. Subtract from memory, so it'll take that back. I could add it a couple times, subtract it a couple times. Then we have memory S. That gives us different little pieces of memory. And we have memory R. This is for recall. So if I click on this, it will recall that piece of memory. Let's see if I can do it. There it is right there. So memory recall. Now I can clear the memory. I can clear everything I have on there. But of course, we still have history we can work with as well. I can clear the history with the delete button down there. Okay, so that's the standard calculator. Of course, you could do 4 for, and then you could do 1 over 4. That gives you that. You could do 2 squared. That's going to give you 4. You could do, let's see, we need a good number. 16 square rooted is going to give you 4. So basic calculator functions that you might need. And we'll clear that memory as well. So there's our basic calculator, but there is still a lot more to this calculator to go. We have the scientific calculator. This is going to provide you some more functions. Let's go ahead and make this even bigger. We have a lot of different functions that we can work with here. We even have secondary functions we can click second for and get some different math tools here. We have the trigonometry tools like sine, cosine, and tangent that we might need. We have stuff for functions. Okay. We have all kinds of different tools. Of course, we still have the memory tools. This one changes from our calculator from degrees to radians to gradients. And then FE here is going to be for exponents if you need to put in a scientific value there. We also have modulo. So mod is for remainder. We have exponents here. We have factorial. So n factorial there. If you need that absolute value, of course, still 1 over x, parentheses, all the little tools you need for a good scientific calculator. And this calculator is going to be better than 90% of what you can get on just any calculator you can buy from like the store, right? Then if we go up a notch, let's say that we need even more. Let's say we need even more. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this right here. Now, depending on what type or version of Windows you have, you may or may not have the graphing calculator function on here. It's kind of irritating that I don't, but I have also noticed that computers at the school also do not have this on there, which is disappointing to say the least. But there are other options if you need a calculator that will do graphing. You may have heard of this one right here, Desmos. You can get a free little graphing calculator online. This is the one. There's also an app for it that you can get on your phone. Very useful tool for graphing. So we'll get rid of that. Of course, if you have the professional version, you can get the graphing calculator. Another useful tool here is the programmer calculator. So if we look at this one is excellent. So if you've had to convert with decimal and binary before by hand, no longer. You have a calculator for that. So we can, this is decimal, hexadecimal, octal, which is base 8, and we have binary. We have different little like bitwise, like and, or, not, nan, nor, XOR, all those different little operations that we can do. We also have bit shift operators that you can mess around with there. And these are all different little programmer tools. If I wanted to convert hexadecimal here, so I've got like A6, for example, I'll see that in decimal that's 166, octal that's 246, and in binary I have that there. And depending on what I need, if I want to convert from binary to everything else, I just click on binary here, and then I type the binary number, and I get everything else based off of that. And same thing for those. If I wanted to convert from hexadecimal, I click on that. You see that I get the hexadecimal stuff, so I can do FF, and that's 255 in decimal, 377 in octal, and 8 ones in binary. So that's a very useful tool. You can also look at this, especially if you have very large numbers that you want to work with. You can change the specific binary value. So I can put a 1 right there. Of course, that's a very long binary value there, and it will tell me what it is in the different data encoding types. So very useful tool if you don't want to have to convert yourself. There are, of course, even better tools out on the internet, but this is a quick little tool that I like to use quite often. We have date calculation, so this will give us the difference between two different dates, and we can check different dates and see what we're looking for. So we can go and find, okay, 31st of that month, and we come down here, okay, how many days is it between those 2 days, and it will give us 49 days, and that's a very useful little tool there as well. Of course, we have converters, all kinds. We have currency converter, so you can check the value. This actually goes out to the internet, and will check the different values of money, and will allow you to convert in that way. We have volume conversion, so all of the different American, imperial type units that we might need, as well as converting to other types of units there as well, like liters, for example. Same thing with length. We have all of the different imperial type units as well as metric units that we can switch between. We have a weight and mass calculator. We have temperature. It's got Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin, which are very cool. By the way, if you didn't know, Celsius is based on water, Fahrenheit is based on mercury, and Kelvin is based on atoms. So very cool there. We've got energy calculations that we can change between. We have area, speed, time, power, data. Data is really good for bytes and bits. Very useful if you need to switch between them. We've got pressure, and of course angle. Angle is very good for degrees, radians, and gradians there as well. And then we have settings. The only really cool thing in settings is you can change the theme from the really ugly light theme to a dark theme, or you can just use the system setting, which mine is set to dark. So this calculator is a very powerful little tool that you have available to you. And if you don't have the cool version with the graphing calculator, you can always use Desmos. And Desmos has basically the same stuff and functions in the same way as the graphing calculator would on Windows. Next on our list of useful tools, we have Task Manager. Now, Task Manager keeps track of all of the running processes, as well as different things like the memory and CPU utilization, different things like that. So let's look at how we can access the Task Manager and what we might be able to use it for that's very useful. So first thing, there is like 100 different ways to get to Task Manager. So let's start with a few simple ones. You can come down here to the start, you can right click on it, and you will find Task Manager right there. You can click on it, and let me go ahead and click fewer details. You'll see something that looks like this, most likely. A very small window that doesn't tell you very much. We're going to do more with that in just a second. So we can go to start and do that. We can do Control Alt and Delete. So Control Alt Delete. And you will see Task Manager right there. It's down at the bottom of that. Then we have Control Shift Escape. This is another one. Control Shift and Escape will open to this window. We have Windows R. You can hit Windows R and you can type Task MGR, not the full word, Task MGR, and hit enter. That will open it as well. And then everybody's favorite, if you can't remember how to get to it in any way, you can click on search and type Task Manager, and it will run it right there for you. So now that we got it open, you're probably looking at something like this unless you've opened it before and you kind of know what you're doing. You're going to click on more details because we need to see more than this. This is the most useless version of Task Manager. So we're going to click on more details, and lo and behold, we got a lot more showing up now. A couple of things that we're going to look at first. If we go up here, we've got File, Options, and View. The first thing that I want to do is on Options, I want to click Always on Top. And here's the reason why I want Task Manager to always be on top. If I need to get out of a program, and I can open up Task Manager in one of the many ways that I showed you, right? I want it to be on top so that I can access it if there's something bugging out on the computer. And the reason is, here's an excellent example. Let's say Visual Studio Code's having a major problem. Right? Let's say it's having a major issue. It's all frozen up. I can't do anything with it. I can't click on anything, right? But I can get Task Manager open. If I don't have it always on top, it may open up behind the frozen window, and that would cause an issue for me. And so if Visual Studio Code's bugging out, I can come here and I can say, okay, we've got processes, and maybe I don't want Edge to be running. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to click End Task. Right? And that doesn't always end all of the Microsoft Edge tasks. So I may have to end a couple of them. I may have to click on it a couple times. Let's go up here to Visual Studio Code and try ending it. I can end that task. Look, it took care of that one as well. Let's see if I can go down here. There we go. Now we're getting rid of some Edge tasks. Sometimes when you see several of them like this, one of them is the parent, the one that spawned all of the others. And if you get the right one, you can get rid of them all. Now, you can't always just get rid of them because there's usually some, little things that prevent you from turning off certain items. There's Skype. Like, I'm not using Skype right now. Let's see if we can end that task. There we go. And we were able to end that. So if you're having trouble or you're trying to get out of a window or trying to get out of a program, Task Manager is a great place to come and you can see what you're dealing with. Now, there's some other things we need to look at here under processes. We can sort by name, status, the amount of usage of the CPU, memory, disk, network, power. If you have a GPU, you'll see GPU here. Of course, I do not have a GPU on a virtual machine, so it's not showing up there. But CPU utilization, memory, which is your RAM, and then we have disk, which is your hard disk, whatever your storage device is. The network usage, and this is based on your network interface card, and not the actual streaming data bandwidth over your network. And of course, we have things for power usage. So if you're seeing some of these, and on a school computer, I guarantee you're going to see that one near 100% all the time. This just so happens to be running pretty well at the moment on mine. So we can see the apps that are running, background processes that are running currently, and we can kill them if we need to in order to get out of things. We can look at performance here, and we can see our CPU utilization on a graph. We can see the percent, the speed, threads that are being used, processes that are going, how long it's been up and running, all sorts of good information. You can even open something called the resource monitor here. That's a little more advanced if you're looking for that. Here it tells me the CPU that I have, and I do have an AMD Ryzen 7 5700 there. Very good, very happy with that. You can look at the memory. So my total memory that I've allotted for it is about 16 gigabytes, and the usable piece of that is about 15.6, and it's only using 2.3 right now, staying very consistent. We can see how much of the disk is being written, read, and written to, and it doesn't look like we're doing much with that. You can also see, whoops, I did not mean to do that. See if we can get out of that. Right click, and there we go. And we can look at this. If you want to get into that view, you can click Summary View, and that's how you get into that little picture there. But this is very good for us looking at and trying to keep track of what's going on in our system and help us get out of some things if we're having some trouble. If we go to App History, we can see all of the different apps that we have been running since we started. And you'll see some interesting things like, why the heck is Solitaire? You can sort of see maybe what's been running and doing things like that. And you can, of course, filter. If you click on the tabs up here, you can filter by what's doing what, based on most or least, however you want to do that. Startup is a very useful one. So if you have an issue, and your startup may look different than mine, but if you have an issue with Microsoft Edge creating a big window that you can't seem to get out of, if you will open up Task Manager, right click and click on Disable. So you go to Startup, you find Microsoft Edge, you disable it, that will probably solve that problem. You'll see Microsoft OneDrive is disabled. If you've got Google Drive on here and it's driving you nuts, you can do the same thing, and that will remove that particular problem where it's running on startup. So anything here that you're seeing, I don't want that running on startup, it's getting in my way, it's causing problems, or my computer's taking a long time to boot up and get everything going, you might check your startup here and see what you can disable so that you have the minimum number of things running on startup. We can check users here, and you can see if there are multiple users logged in with processes running. Right now there's only me, right? And if I wanted to be real crazy, I could disconnect. I can also go to manage user accounts. I can expand and see what processes are being run by my user. And if I want to get rid of one, I can go to end task, right? If I want to. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There, you of course can also look at properties. This is very useful. Let's say I'm having trouble with one, and I'm not really sure whether it's malware or not, right? See if it'll let me. Yeah, it doesn't like me looking at Microsoft Edge. Let's see if I can find another one. See if it's going to show my properties on any of these. It's not being very cooperative. Let's start one I know will work. Let's go to Chrome here. There we go. Started some Chrome processes. Let's go to properties. Oops, being difficult. All right, give me just a minute. Found the mistake. So what it is it's opening up the properties behind the task manager, because task manager is always on top. So if I click off of always on top here, and then I go to users again, and I open up the properties of Microsoft Edge, there you'll see it right there. And so, yeah, if you run into that problem, it's just because you clicked always on top. And you do want it always on top, because it just makes it easier if you run into a problem. So we can look at the properties. We can see where the file is located on the system, and maybe some different things about it, details, that sort of stuff, and see if it's a potentially problematic piece of programming. We can look at details here, so we can see the details of the running processes and things that we have. You'll notice a lot of executable programs on here. Let's look at Explorer here. I could end the task or end the process tree. And the process tree is in all of the programs associated with Explorer, and that can be useful. You can open file location. This one I really like if I'm not sure about the file, and I can open where it exists at and take a good look at it. Then we have services. Finally, these are all background things that are running. Most of them are necessary for the computer to work properly, so I wouldn't just go and start trying to turn these off. You may not even have permission to do those if you're not an administrator. But that's the basics of Task Manager. The most useful thing in most cases is that you can't seem to get out of a program and you need to get out of it. Task Manager will help you end that process, and it'll even sort of help you understand if something is locked up and needs to be ended that way. All right, finally, we're going to look at the control panel here. The control panel is what keeps track of all of our settings. Of course, we have settings. If we come over here and we type in settings, we have this settings application that Windows has started moving towards. Of course, it's getting harder and harder to actually get to the control panel, but you can do more with the control panel than you can with these settings here. And so we're going to look at that control panel. There are a couple different ways to get to it. I like the Windows R, and then you type control panel like that and hit enter, and it opens it up this way. I also like just going to the search bar and typing control panel, and you'll see it right there. It can open up that way as well. Now, the control panel is basically just the settings panel for everything on the computer. There are a couple of interesting things to look at. First of all, uninstalling a program. If we need to do that, here is where we would do it. We would click uninstall, and we could right click on, and if we have permission to do it, we can uninstall that program. If we go back here, we have a couple of other interesting things. You can change your date and time. You can personalize things, deal with user accounts here. I've done that before pretty interestingly. There was an account on a device that should not have been there, and you could take it off using that right there. A good little trick. We also have system and security. There's lots of really good things here for helping protect your computer and do things like keep backups so that your data doesn't get lost in case something happens. Network and internet problems. Hardware and sound here. is a good one. If we have devices, we can look at Device Manager, even though we don't have admin privileges. And you can see these are all the devices that may or may not be connected. And we'll have we have a keyboard, we have some mice, and we can look and see if we have some issues. We can check for drivers and try to update the drivers if we're having issues there. All kinds of interesting little things you can see. And you should be able to find any of your devices that have actually been connected here in Device Manager. You have some simple things like power and options, but for the most part, what you really need to know about Control Panel is how to get to it, and that it is the settings that you can change for your computer. And of course, under System and Security, a very important one you need to know about is your firewall. The firewall is an extremely useful thing, and you need to make sure that it is on. It helps protect against people from outside of your computer trying to connect to your computer. And if you have a poorly configured firewall or no firewall at all, you may be in a lot of danger. And so make sure that that is on.